It won't be long before it's time to start seeds for your garden, and if you're considering using soil blocking as a new seed starting method this year, then I have a few tips for you. First of all, I guess we need to talk about what soil blocking is if you're not sure. So it is pretty much just compressed soil, and then you'll place the seed into that, and it'll allow the roots to be air pruned rather than being inside of a cup, your plant to become root bound. And that's not really wanted in a lot of plants, especially like squash or cucumbers, where they're a bit more sensitive when you go to transplant them. Now, this is a soil blocker. This is a 2-inch one. When it comes to soil blocking, it does actually require a certain soil type so that it will compact. The ingredients that I use, and these are interchangeable, you can find what works best for you and your price range. I'll just use compost. I'll use 1 5-gallon bucket of that, and then I'll mix in a 1 pound block of coco coir. You'll just let that get saturated with water and then mix that in. And then I'll add in 1 8-quart bag of perlite. I'll use a smaller grain for this, usually just because it's more available. But once you mix all of this together, that will provide you with a mix that's going to hold its shape. The coco coir, that tends to give a fibrous aspect to it, which is going to help it hold its shape, and it also holds water really well. That goes for the compost too. And then perlite, that provides aeration. Okay, so when you first go to make your soil block, you'll want to make sure that your soil mix is already moistened. If it's dry, it will not compact in there. I like to put it into a smaller container like this where you can push it against the bottom a little easier. I've seen plenty of people do it in larger totes as well, whatever works best for you. Then you just take and push down and twist. See? You see we don't have them all filled up. Sorry. Another thing that people will do is coat this setup in a rubber coating, because after doing this for a good little while, it can become sore on your hands. Oh my goodness. Okay, there you have that. And what I like to do is just, you see how this is out a little higher? You don't have to, but I just like to scrape it so that everything's flat and even. Usually I'll take a butter knife, a plastic butter knife, and scrape it. I just don't have one on me right now. And that will usually keep it from going outside of your bucket like that. And then once you have your dirt compacted into the soil blocker, you're going to grab a tray. Push down and then pull the lever up. You see? And then I just like to take and separate them a little bit. Now that you have your soil blocks on your tray, what you will do to sow your seeds, if it's a fine seed like chamomile, you'll just come through and surface sow that, sprinkle it over your blocks, and then come back with a soil mix. A dry soil mix works best, and just lightly cover that. And then if it's a larger seed like a cucumber, then you'll just stick that into the center hole that's created by the insert in the soil block. And you can either, again, come back with your dry mix, or most of the time it works well just to do something of that nature. So it's pretty simple when you go to sow your seeds, and then don't forget to label them. So to label, you can use masking tape or whatever you have on hand. Grab you a marker, a pen, and just, put it on there, something like that. And then once you have your tray labeled, you can either cover it in plastic wrap. They have humidity dome tops that you can get. That one's a little small. It doesn't go to this, but you could do something of that nature. Or my favorite thing to do with the soil blocking and the humidity chambers, just because it's easier and it doesn't disturb the blocks or the seeds too much whenever you're moving things around in the beginning. I just like to take a tray, sit these down in there, and then you'll either cover the tray with plastic, or if you have one of the clear humidity domes that fit these, then you can use that as well. But these work great, and then you'll just sit this on top of a heat mat for best results. And once they start sprouting, grab them out of your humidity dome and put them under your grow light. Personally, whenever I am working with soil blocking, I only have one heat mat to go through all of my seed starting stuff, and I start a lot of seeds. So what I will do is actually rotate or get boxes that I can stack and rotate. So I'll have one box of these seeds, and I'll have a lid or something hard on top to where it won't collapse. And then I'll stack another top. That way the heat is still kind of rising up, because some seeds need light to germinate and others don't. A lot of the times I will use a clear box, a clear boot box. This isn't a boot box. This is just a regular container. One second. This is a boot box. I just get these from Walmart. They used to be clear, but I just went back and looked not long ago, and they've turned to like a grayish color. So I guess they've changed that up a bit, but it really doesn't matter. So these boxes are clear, and they work great for everything. I use them for terrariums, propagation, and also seed starting. So I'll have to get those cleared out. Most of them have stuff like this in them right now. They work great to keep in humidity. I actually need to water this one. It's been sitting for a while. But what you will do with these are great for stacking, is same thing. You'll just sit these in there. I can usually fit 2 trays in this size. Put your lid on, and then you can stack several boxes on top of each other and then rotate them to maximize your space versus the amount of heat mats that you have. So that is one way to maximize your seed starting ability. Other than a soil mixture that holds together well, you'll need something to put your soil blocks on. I use and recommend recycled meat and produce trays. I have these clear ones here that I like to use. It's just a personal preference. You can use whichever color, or the foam ones. They work just as well. People also use wooden trays, or like the bottoms for these cell trays without holes. I don't really like the larger trays. I feel like the outside of the blocks will dry out before the center of the tray. So I do like to stick with a smaller tray. I feel like it just goes a lot better, and there's more consistency throughout the blocks. Probably the biggest struggle with soil blocking is the watering schedule. With me, I'll typically have to water them 1 to 2 times daily, but with that being said, I do have a fan pointed pretty much directly at them, and they are under grow lights. So they do dry out quickly, and that's something that you'll have to gauge based on your growing environment. So definitely be prepared to water them at least once daily, sometimes twice daily. As for watering, I believe that it works best whenever you take your soil blocks, put them onto your tray, and then just separate them, give them maybe a 1/4 inch between each of them, and that's going to allow the water to flow more freely throughout the tray and give everything a more even watering. Whenever you're watering your trays, especially if you're using a shallow one like this, beware that they can overflow. So you may have to water, let the block soak up a bit of it, and then go through and water again. And it just takes a few seconds. So you just may have to have a little bit of patience with it, and then it will have best effect. And then that way it's going to absorb as much water as possible, and then you're going to have to water less, hopefully. Now, with your watering schedule, you'll want to include a fertilizer. Once a week, I'll add a diluted fertilizer. This is just the Neptune's Harvest Fish and Seaweed Fertilizer. You don't have to use this or an organic. You can use whatever fertilizer you want to use. Just make sure that it's diluted and not too strong, because like with any seedling, you can burn it up if you use too strong of a fertilizer. And don't do it more than once a week either. If you're using it too often, that can give the same result. You may think it's helping your plants, but it's just harming them more. So they just need a little bit of fertilizer to keep them going, and they'll be great. Now, whenever you are watering your soil blocks and they're also under light, you can face algae on those, and it's not usually detrimental, but it can definitely stunt the growth of your seedlings. So what I like to use for that is a copper fungicide. It knocks it out pretty much overnight. You might have to use it for a couple of days, but whenever this happens to you, don't freak out, don't toss the blocks, just get a copper fungicide. The copper fungicide is at least the method that I use. I'm sure that there are other ways out there, but this is my tried and true method, so I don't feel a need to stray away from that. All right, now that you've gotten a couple of tips on the soil composition, trays, and how to keep them healthy, what else you should think about is also what you're going to be planting in your soil blocks. So if it's going to be something that grows quickly or slowly, how big it's going to get and how quickly, and if you're going to keep growing it inside, so you'll need to up pot it, or if you're going to be able to take it straight outside. So these are all factors that you may want to consider when you're using soil blocks. If it's not going to work for you, then you can just use solo cups or cell trays if that's going to work better for you, because those methods definitely hold their water better. So then we'll just go through those key points. So you'll have your soil blocks, you'll put that on your tray, you'll sow your seeds, put it in your humidity chamber, let them sprout. Once they're sprouted, put it under your light. And then you'll want to water once to twice daily, with 1 day weekly being a fertilizer day. Remember, dilute your fertilizer. Less is more here. And then if you get algae, hit it with a copper fungicide, and that'll knock it out. Other things that you should consider are you going to be willing to take care of these soil blocks for at least a couple of months? Depending on what you're growing, it could be as little as 4 weeks. But the soil blocks, after you're watering them once or twice a day for that amount of time, it can be pretty tiring, and sometimes you can lose stuff. Say you have something going on and you miss a couple of days, you could lose your plants in that small amount of time. So those are things that you have to be prepared for. Other than that, I don't think that there's any other things that you really need to overthink, other than if it gets to be too much, to just pot it up, whether it's a paper pot or a plastic pot. So they have like a 1/2 inch version that you can get. So you'll create like your 1/2 inch squares. You can germinate all of your seeds and see what's successful. Then you can take and up pot those into a 2 inch. They do have indentions that you can get that's about a 1/2 inch square, so that will create the spot for that up pot. And then what else you can do is get a 4-inch version of this. So that will typically come in just a single blocker. So this one has about 4. I believe the 1/2 inch has about 20. And so you'll just take your 4-inch block, create that, and then put the 2-inch block in from there. So you don't necessarily have to use plastic or paper pots if you do want to continue up potting and keeping it inside for longer and you need more soil. So there are many options available to you. So you just have to take what works best for you and run with it. And also, don't be afraid to try new things when it comes to your gardening experience. Okay, well, I hope that this video was helpful to you, and let me know if you have any questions. Thank you. Bye.